Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, one of the major problems with any kind of serious viral, generally illnesses, flus, etc., because they cause filling of the lungs. I mean, if you read what a lot of people die from, particularly the elderly, once they go into the hell chamber called a hospital, the worst place to get well in, they die from pneumonia. Well, this is interesting, and this is very common, and trying to cure anything in the lungs is just yet another common failure by the failure of medical science, otherwise known as we'll take trillions and produce nothing because you let us do it. You love us. We're doctors. We're criminals. So the whole idea is that once something gets in your lungs, there's very difficult to clear it out. Now, there are things you can do to take care of lung infections. And as a person who's had lung infections most of their life, I had horrible allergies, which then dripped into my lungs and gave me bronchitis, something fierce, every single year as a child, into my late teens. And finally, getting allergy shots and taking other pills alleviated it somewhat, but not really. So what happened is, how do you clear your lungs out? Well, I tried many things, and of course I would fill up my lungs. I'd be pretty much be bedridden for 3 months a year, coughing up all this phlegm that kept getting into my lungs. So this was a serious problem, and of course, as I said, during my middle to late teens, I was able to alleviate it somewhat using a lot of particular antihistamines, etc. But the problem is you continually have that, and I've always had that. And there's several things I've done to stop this. But one of the things that's a tried and true way is using salt inhaler. And here's a brand name of a nice little porcelain unit. You can see here that I dropped this, but I was able to glue it back together. It's porcelain, which is what you want to get. Now, I bought a backup here, and I didn't really know it at the time, but this backup unit is plastic, which is not good to use. You need to get away from all plastic. But I decided to just show you this here because I am going to trash this after this video. But this gives you a good idea of how this kind of things work. So what do you do? What's a tried and true way to take care of your lungs? Well, there's two ways of doing this, and we're going to talk about that. One of them that's been done for millenniums is people would go down into salt mines, salt caves. And you'd sit in there for a few hours, and you would read a book, sit on a chair. And there are salt mines like this in operation today in different parts of the country. And you just sit in there, and you breathe in what is considered salt air. And salt is a great purifier. Salt is really very good for you. It's been demonized recently because they put lots of crappy salt, because there's many types of salts, by the way. And these salts, of course, hold water. Water increases blood pressure and causes added weight and even death because of high blood pressure. Now, your kidneys are supposed to regulate all this. There is really very little data that salt itself will cause you problems. If you look at the medical research done in this, if you have too much salt, it means your kidneys aren't kicking them out. But if you're eating gobs of salt, your kidneys probably can't keep up. So, I mean, that's what happens with all these types of things, because there's salt in everything. You name it, they put lots of salt. It's a cheap way to fill products up and give it a taste that everybody kind of responds to. So it's loaded in potato chips. There's salt in absolutely everything. You'd be surprised. And generally, if you're a chef, you're told always to put in salt and pepper because this brings the flavors out. This could even be in cakes and puddings and other things. But your food is loaded with salt. No matter where you live, everybody piles it in. So if you're eating a lot of things, you're getting too much salt, and this is really bad salt as well. Now, what's interesting is there's studies of people using pure Himalaya type salt, which is what this bottle is for, that actually have taken salt to lower blood pressure, because if you use the right pure salts, it balances your body and any excess is kicked out. You use the kind of toxic junk salt that you get from Morton's and other places, and you're going to have all sorts of problems. So you always want to use pure Himalayan salts that are undoctored, or pure sea salts. But I prefer Himalayan salts because the sea is America, or it's not America, the world's sewer. They got a problem? Let's throw it in the sewer. It's called the sea. That's right. And of course, the Japanese are belching in millions of tons of toxic Fukushima radiation into the ocean. How nice. Keeping up the Japanese model of barbaric murderers that they are. So as we move on, we need to fully understand that salt is really good for you, and salt in your lungs can purify it and move it out of your body. So if you have different types of congestion, etc., people go into salt mines, and they sit there for hours and they get great effects from it. Now, generally, there's absolutely no side effects from using these. If for some reason you have super high blood pressure or something, maybe you're going to get a little salt, but I think that's a bogus understanding of what's going on. So the whole idea is that you should do this before you have any kind of problems, not when you get sick. So inhaling salt on a consistent basis, because of all the air pollution, the toxins, the viruses going around, is something to do all the time. And it's super easy. And what's the ultimate grabber? It's cheap. Anytime you can find something cheap, you're in a great area. So let's look at what a salt inhaler is. Now, here's the plastic one that I'm going to dispose of, but basically at the bottom there are vents. At the side here is where you actually put the salt in. And again, you have to use granulated, big granulated salt. You can't use powdered salt or salt that is in a shaker, because it'll go through these holes and you tend to breathe it in. You don't want to breathe the salt in like it's a powder. You want to get a certain amount of salt residue from big grain salt. And you can see what big grain salt looks like. Often called rock salt, kosher salt. Mostly today it's called Himalayan salts, and any good Himalayan or pure salt will do. So what you do is you fill up your container with it. Now, this isn't a very good design, period. It has this little cap here, and the cap is very hard to get off. You got to pry it off with a knife. A really bad design, but it is a nice small one. And what's nice about this is because it's, you can see the difference here. It's about half the size of this one here, which is porcelain. And you can see from my repair that if you drop this, you're going to break it. So this can be carried with you, but I'm not a big fan of that. Maybe there's smaller salt porcelain types that you can get, because anything that has to do with plastic, you've got problems. And of course, salt is corrosive, so it's going to eat into the plastic, and you're going to bring bad. As I said, I'm throwing this away, but you get the pleasure of seeing it. Let's go look inside. Isn't that fascinating? Hey, yeah, it's a hole with looks like there's hose at the bottom. But what you do is you fill it up. You put the caps on it, and then what? You breathe in here. You put your lips here, and you suck in. You never suck out into your container, because then you're going to push moist air in there, which will create toxins and bacteria. So you breathe in, you take your mouth away, and then you breathe out away from this. So you don't breathe in. You don't breathe out. You only breathe in, meaning you're pulling the air in from the holes at the bottom, coming up through here and going into your lungs. You don't want to breathe back into it, so be very careful with that. If you put wet moisture into the salts, which will grab it and hold it as salt does, it still is creating bacteria. You don't want that. You're trying to get rid of bacteria. So the same thing is with this. This had a plastic bottom on it, and I replaced it with a cork. Get rid of plastic. But you do the same thing. Here you have the holes at the bottom. This is then filled up with salt. And then, of course, you breathe in. So you suck in, hold it a little bit, remove this, and breathe out. Don't breathe back in. Everybody get that? I said that 10 times, and maybe it got through. What was that, Green Acres is on, and I'm not concentrating too good. And Zorro comes on after that. So, what did you say? Never breathe back into it. You only breathe through it. Plain and simple. So let's look at the salt here again that I have, which is this Himalayan type salt. Now, I take everything out of their plastic, garbage, toxic, petroleum-based poisons that we need none of course, in daily life, but they're great for making tires, Stuart. Yes, they are. But I don't eat my tires. Oh, I do. They're good with a little ketchup. Okay, so here is your typical type of rock salt. Okay, see how this is? Now, oftentimes gourmet salt will come like this, and that it's in a little grinder, similar to pepper they do now. So you can take really high quality, good salt and even use it on your food sparingly by using a little grinder. And you twist the grinder and you get salt at the bottom instead of pepper. And this is the way to do things, and of course you get much better salt that way. As I said, any kind of salt that is pourable, that you use in containers normally, which everybody has on their table, stay away from. There's a great question, what's in that salt, number one. It probably isn't pure salt. There's everything from possibly glass to metals to all sorts of things that could be in that salt to make it pour better. What is that? But that's the way corporate world works. It's got to look pretty and function properly regardless of the toxicity. So, but just like people who grind their own coffee beans to get a better flavor, you can grind your own salt like you do with pepper. Because there's very little difference between salt and pepper in terms of the process. There's a little pod that you're grinding. Well, here's a little cube that you're grinding. This is the way to do it. Secondly, as I said, I used to recommend sea salt. The sea is a sewer. Stay away from it. The less we take from the sea, the better. So, Himalayan rock salt like this, as pure as you can get, is quite good, easy, and it is still very cheap. And as I said, put everything, get anything you get from coffee to anything that comes in plastic. Buy these kind of jars. It keeps it perfectly fresh, and put them in glass. Glass is inert. It's perfect. You can see through it. It's even attractive. And what you have is you can have big jars like this, which I have coffee in, tea in, you name it, I put it in there. I don't keep anything in plastic. When I come home from the store, it all goes in glass. You should do the same. These little things, they don't mean nothing, man. Green Acres on. Let's get to the good stuff. It does mean you have too much plastic. You're eating a credit card of plastic a month. You think that's good for you? I don't think so. People are getting sicker and sicker and sicker and kept alive as vegetables into their 90s, but not functioning. So let's go ahead and show exactly how this particularly works. And as I said, you get this kind of salt. This is kind of pink salt. There's different things. There's even these salt lamps where you put a bulb inside of it, and the bulb heats up and it puts off that very pleasing energy that comes from salt, which is what the foundation of human life to a certain amount is made from. Salt is amazing. It can be used in many metaphysical ways, including burning it and put this, and I will be showing a video on this, You put it in a metal container, pour alcohol on it, and light it. Boy, do the negative spirits hate that. You can put jars of this stuff all over your house, which I have. And you can even use the cheaper salt that is pourable. Put those in little jars with the tops open and put them around your house. This keeps negative spirits away. So salt has been a preservative. It's been a boon. The term salary comes from salt, because the Romans used to pay people in salt because it was so valuable to preserve things and keep a quality of life. So as we go through all these things, we need to fully understand how wonderful salt is. So when you breathe in micro amounts of salt into your lungs, it purifies it. It kills viruses and bacteria, so is it alleged. All of these things you get a great help from, all from salt. And as I said, your typical inhaler looks like this. Here's one, and I should have a link below this where you can buy yours at Amazon. But there's several manufacturers, but again, I stay with the porcelain. And it's just a very simple thing. It's just, you have the bottom so you can breathe through it. If this didn't have holes at the bottom, you couldn't bring any air through. But basically, this is filled up with what's in here. You breathe, you put your mouth on this, and you breathe deeply in. You then remove this from your mouth and breathe out. Crystal clear? Saltly clear?